Hello. Today is April 27th, 2009. We're meeting today with Mr. Eugene Andersen at his home in Greeley, Colorado. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for the Northern Colorado Veterans History Project. Welcome, Eugene, and I understand you go by Andy.
That's correct.
Thanks for sitting down today to participate in this project. If we could, let's start out with tell us a little bit about yourself, your date of birth, where you were born, a little bit about your family.
Okay. Well, I was born in Plainview, Nebraska. At the age of 1 or under, I was brought to eastern Colorado, where my dad was a farmer.
What town in eastern Colorado?
Flaglar, Colorado.
Okay.
And lived there, graduated from Flaglar High School in 1940. From there, I went to Greeley to a radio school. The war had started, or was about to start. So it was a civil service job, and they trained us as radio repair people.
Was this anticipation of going into the military then?
Yes,
Or?
yeah.
Okay.
And then in the meantime, I went into the reserves because that way I could stay out a little bit longer and go to this school. Then in January of, it must have been 42, they called me to active duty.
Okay. Yeah, let's back up a quick second. Do you remember where you were and what you were thinking when you heard that Pearl had been bombed?
I was at neighbor's house out at Flagler, Colorado, and the neighbor had heard it on he had a old battery operated radio. It came on the news. But then it didn't seem as like it is today, where it happens in 1 second and the next second the whole world knows about it.
Yeah, right.
But it was kind of a shock. But
Now, you said at this point you'd already been in the reserves prior to this?
no.
Oh, it was after?
After.
Okay.
I heard the news, and then afterwards, that's when I went to the government school.
Oh, okay.
And then I was in that, and then my number came up to be called, and since I was going to this government school, they said if I joined the reserves, I could finish my radio school, and that's what I did.
Now, did you have your choice of what branch you wanted to get into, or?
Well, yes and no. I had joined up for the Signal Corps because that would have been communications, radio.
Mm-hmm.
And then called up then and sent me to California. At Davis, California, there was a school there, and the Army had taken it. It was an agriculture college, and the Army had taken that over and was training troops there. Went there for about, maybe 6 or 8, 10 months, that school.
Was it schooling, or was it a boot camp type of thing?
Well, no, it was. We went right to the University of California Agricultural College at near Sacramento. It was a state-run or government-run school.
For more radio training?
Yeah, for more training.
So you kind of more or less skipped over boot camp, or?
Well, I had 6 weeks.
Oh, okay.
Learned how to shoot the Army, rifle range, and that was it. 6 weeks is all we had of that. Then from then on, it was schools until I shipped overseas. I was at Camp Crowder, Missouri, was Signal Corps School, and from there I shipped out of Upton, New York, I believe it was. There's a song about that. Camp Upton, New York, and from there I shipped out to England, landed in Liverpool, and was in London, or in England probably, 6, 8 weeks, and then from there.
Well, how was that? How was the transition for you from civilian life to military life?
Well, it wasn't that hard because I grew up on a farm, so the training was not very tough.
Yeah.
Because we were used to hard work and long hours. So.
Well, along those same lines, growing up on a farm on the plains of Colorado, from New York, you shipped out to England. Talk about that crossing. How was that? Did you get your sea legs? How was that crossing?
Yeah, it didn't bother me too much, but
really?
A lot of people really got really sick.
Yeah.
But no, it didn't bother me, but it got over to England and it was freezing over there. It never freezes really like it does here. but it's so damp, and there was no fuel, and you was training over there, and always you seemed like you were always wet and cold.
Well, now were you at that point assigned into a unit?
No, I went over as a replacement.
Okay. Okay.
And I don't the specifics I can't tell you exactly, but we were in this replacement camp, and a guy came in and asked for 5 volunteers, and
Isn't that kind of the unwritten rule in the military?
Yeah.
Never volunteer.
no, you never volunteer, but you know, yeah, don't volunteer, but if you don't, we're going to point you anyway, so it didn't make any difference. I can still remember in basic training, they'd always ask for truck drivers, and the next thing you know, they were pushing a wheelbarrow down the street. So you never volunteered for anything. But then from there...
So when they came in to ask for volunteers, maybe I think I interrupted your story
No,
there.
you didn't.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, went to that, and that was... I got assigned to the Supreme Headquarters, and that was quite a deal, because, you know, everybody, they don't tell you they're frightened, but they are, you know, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, oh sure.
So at one time between being in England and before I went to this Supreme Headquarters, I was appointed to drop into France with the FFI.
Really?
And I said, I told him that I didn't know how to, I'd never parachuted, and he said, that's all right, we'll push you out, and the parachute will open up and you'll land.
The FFI being the Free French?
Free French of the interior.
Yeah. And what, you were going with because of your radio skills, or?
Yeah, well, I don't know what my job would have been there, but that's when, at one time, you know, the Free French in that free part of the Vichy government, they had quite an organization going there.
Yeah.
But we were at the airport ready to go, and all of a sudden they canceled it out, so I didn't have to go there.
Holy wow.
But then we went to, left out of Southampton, went to Omaha Beach, and we went one of the, what's this guy from New Orleans that made all those boats?
Higgins boat?
Higgins boats. Jumped off in about 2 or 3 feet of water.
Now, how much after D-Day was that?
Well, it'd been 11 days after D-Day.
11 days.
Because we were still shoveling beaches.
Wow.
And
What was the scene there? What did things look like?
well, there was military junk trash all over, and they had aisles to walk up through. You know that they had searched for
mines and such.
Landmines, and you had to stay on that. But they really had a lot of those landmines there. And not long after that, even before we left the beach, I don't know how long we was there, maybe a couple of weeks. But they had Germans, prisoners out there digging up those landmines. So.
So you crossed over onto Normandy as part of the Supreme Command headquarters. You were moving with the headquarters.
Yeah.
Or?
It was a civilian. Well, it'd be like the CIA. That wasn't really
the OSS.
Well, close to that, but not really.
Okay.
When a town was liberated, our group went in there and set up local government. Most of the people in my outfit were civilians, but I was in the army. But most of the people, and they set up local government, and they ferreted out the Nazis and the ones that weren't, and all these kind of good things. I think got pretty rough too with some of those guys.
Now, your responsibility within this unit was still the radios?
Still telephone.
Telephone, okay.
And radio. Okay. Put up a lot of telephone on electric lines. So I'm sure some people got some shocks after the war because you didn't have the equipment to set them up, and of course the electricity and everything was all damaged. But I know that one place we set up a telephone unit right in there, and we used all electric lines. They cut the main line coming in, and that's what they used.
Wow. So you guys followed up and would go into these towns and set up and...
Yeah, we'd probably be maybe, well, sometimes more than that, and sometimes right up next to the front
line.
But just as soon as the town was liberated, here they came, and we came, and they set up local governments.
Wow.
So lots and lots of displaced people, lots of displaced people. And that was a poor thing, as people were starving to death. They didn't know where they was going, where they came from, or anything. Just thousands and thousands of people.
Wow.
And then from there, we just followed it, and then the war ended when we were right outside of Munich, Germany. And of course, Dachau is only about 25 miles from Munich. So I got out there, and you can't describe the sights there. I mean, you just not enough adjectives to describe what you see. People laying all over the courtyard. Some were so weak they couldn't get up. Some were dead. Some were dying. But it was pretty pathetic.
And once again, that was your group's responsibility to get things organized
no,
there?
No, we were just there. We were
okay.
just there. We were just there. Most of us were just sightseeing then, because the war was really over by then. What did it end? The 28th of April or something like that?
I think the first week in May or something like that, 5th of May or something.
I think that there was I know I was on guard duty one night, and you could hear machine gun fire and rifle fire throughout. Munich's a big city, but it was totally destroyed. I was talking to an old telephone guy, a German guy, but he was in a telephone system, and he said, well, it was close to 1 million people lived in Munich, and he said there was less than 100 houses that weren't damaged. The rest of it was, but I can remember going down through there, and they just used bulldozers down the streets so they could make roadways. It was nothing but total ruin.
Wow. Wow.
Total ruin.
Wow.
I don't know what else to add to it, only at Dachau, where this Yugoslavian came up and asked for food, and I told him that was it. Now that has, I should shut that off. I gotta ask. When we got to Munich, we stayed in a castle right outside of Munich, and then that's when we went from there up to Dachau. And the guards, I'll describe a little of it the way I've seen it.
Please.
The guards were all killed, the dogs were all killed. In every city, or I don't know what word to use, but they all have courtyards. And they had thrown the dogs and the German guards in this irrigation ditch, and I can remember the courtyard was flooded, and those people were out there laying down in that water, and some of them so weak they couldn't get up, and it was just undescribable.
Now did the prisoners kill the guards and the dogs, or how did...
The prisoners killed the guards and the dogs. They heard the gunfire, and they knew it was over with. And of course, and I understand this later, and I don't know this to be true, but they dropped pamphlets, they said, over Dachau, and told the people to hide, do whatever, so that they wouldn't get hurt. But anyway, that's when this Yugoslavian came up and asked for food, and I said, well, they wouldn't let us give you food because it's all concentrated, and it would have probably killed him.
Yeah.
But then when I asked him how he learned to speak English, he said that he had herded sheep at Laramie, Wyoming for 25 years.
Is that right?
And he was going to live in luxury in Yugoslavia, and then the regime found out he had lived in the West, and that's when they sent him to Dachau. And I know this to be a true story, this pastor Nehemiah, the Lutheran bishop of the Lutheran churches in Germany, was in Dachau concentration camp. I did not see him, but I know that was a true story.
Wow.
That he was there. But some of the sites at the crematorium, they would have bodies lined up like you'd line up cordwood, stacked maybe 2 or 3 feet high, and rows of them waiting to be cremated.
What are you? I can't imagine walking up and seeing that. How you process that
Yeah, of course you're different when you're in a service like that and you see all the destruction and stuff. You're not.
I guess you'd kind of gotten callous to it from
Well,
everything
that's
you'd
right.
seen
You
up to
get
that
pretty
point.
calloused when you see that. But all those poor people, it was. You know, that were so almost near death. A lot of them, and a lot of them were dead. But of course, the crematorium was big enough to burn all the bodies. So then that's when they dug big pits, and well, the Americans came in, and I understand they did the same thing. There was so many people dying that, well, they wouldn't have the facilities to take care of all of them anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't know what else to tell you. I stayed over there then after there about 6 months, because the war was ended in May, and I got home here in the United States Christmas Eve, or New Year's Eve down in Sterling, Colorado. That's where I called home. And the bells were ringing, and I thought they were celebrating my coming home, but it was New Year's Eve. But it was quite an experience. I'd never want to do it again.
Yeah.
But money couldn't buy the education you got seeing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, back up. I want to pepper you with a lot of questions.
That's
we
good.
climbed over a lot of experience in a very short period of time. I'd like to dive in a little bit deeper than that. After you'd gone off to, do you remember when you left for California? Was there any sort of send off from home? Did you?
Oh no.
You just
no.
Did you go by yourself, or were you?
There was 5 other guys. We were transferred from. Gosh, I can't even think where we was at then. Maybe at Fort Logan. Anyway, they sent us to California to camp.
Were these any buddies from home, or were they just 5 guys that you collected?
No, they were just 5 guys. Yeah. Yeah, there was and we were living in Steamboat Springs then. That's where we were married, the wife and myself.
Oh, boy, we've got this whole story. So you were married prior to going into the service?
Yeah, I've been married to that same woman for 67 years.
Oh, well, let's talk a little bit about that. We definitely got over that. So, yeah, a little bit about your situation before you went off. Then, so was this a high school sweetheart, or how did you guys?
She was going to school too. She was raised in Sterling, Colorado, and of course we met here in Greeley, Colorado.
At the school here?
Yeah, they had a government school here. It was up on the university. But that's where I married her. I married her here met her here in Greeley and married her in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. That's where a government school was there then.
How long were you guys married before you shipped off?
Oh, about 2 months.
Is that
going, yeah. And I went from Steamboat to California, and I thought I was going to freeze to death. And it never gets cold out there, not like it does here. It was damp, you know.
Yeah.
But it was, it's okay. You go ahead and ask me something else.
So now you're married, and you're off to. That must have been tough being married, and then having.
And I had 1 child then too.
Is that right?
But I did get to see him before I went overseas.
You had to leave before you.
Yeah. I got to come home when he was born. And I don't know how I arranged that, but the Red Cross got a hold of me and probably helped me a little. I don't know.
Where were you back east when?
No, I was in California then.
I can't imagine. It's one thing, I think, being somewhere overseas single, but to have a wife and child back home.
Of course, there was a lot of, I had friends one friend that just passed away lived in Brighton. He was over there 4 years because he was in North Africa and came up through Italy and then up through southern France. So I only spent about 17 months over there.
Yeah.
Overseas.
Yeah.
So I had it pretty easy compared to a lot of the guys.
How was it, particularly for a lot of people in your generation, that time period? I don't imagine prior to that you traveled much in the way of probably here in Colorado and Nebraska a little bit. Now you're in California, the East Coast, England, France, Germany. What was that like to experience all these?
I don't know whether this is true or not, but I think it is. I don't think I was out of Kit Carson County, Colorado until I went to the service.
Right, right.
And just prior to it probably, because back in those, that was almost horse and buggy days.
For sure, right. And now you're traveling to all these different places, meeting people from, just meeting people from different parts of the country must have been.
Yeah. Well, you know, today, when something happens in Timbuktu, in 30 seconds,
Yeah.
the whole world knows
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Back in those days, you didn't. When I was a kid growing up, we didn't have a telephone.
Right,
We
right.
didn't have electricity.
Right, right. And,
So,
and you couldn't watch a 300 channel cable
Oh,
TV
no,
to find
no,
out of
no.
what life was like in France. To show up there. But
I can remember my dad bought an old radio one time and we used a car battery, and we could only use it on Saturday nights because we didn't have a charger, and we couldn't run down the battery, couldn't start the car. So, but I grew up in tough times.
yeah, yeah.
Tough time. But you know, you didn't know any difference. It's not like today.
Right.
I think some of the things happening today, and I probably shouldn't say this, but you know, if we would probably did some of the things that people are doing today, we'd be in jail. Never thought about it. They never even thought about doing something like that.
Yeah, right, right, right.
So it's from the old school, and seeing what they do today, it's pretty challenging to old people.
Well, we really truly brushed over your early part of your life. You grew up during the Depression, and you were in the area of the Dust Bowl. Do you remember either one of those?
I was right in the middle of the Dust Bowl.
Yeah.
One story I'll remember, and I'll never forget it. My dad planted corn in the spring, and we got a shower in September, and it came up. There was absolutely no vegetation growing at all. Trees and bushes and shrubs even died.
Wow.
No moisture, no moisture. Had to sell all the cattle. I can remember when the government come out and shot the cattle, and you couldn't even skin them or have the meat because that would cause the meat industry to go broke because nobody would eat meat. So you just took them out in the pasture and they shot them, and that's where they laid.
Wow.
Made my dad cry, but we didn't have any feed for them, so they had to do it. It was 7 or 8 years that nothing was growing.
How do you think you guys managed to survive that?
Well, that's it. There was no welfare back in
Yeah,
those days.
right.
So you didn't waste anything. My poor mother, I can remember her out there pumping that old hand pump because the wind didn't even blow to irrigate her garden. And of course, we never wasted a thing. She'd dry corn and beans and make sauerkraut, all those good things. Anything that was edible and could be canned, she'd can it. So tough times.
Yeah,
Tough
yeah.
time, not like today.
Wow.
Not like-
So that's why I guess that go back to an earlier question. Jumping from civilian life into military life. Military life is probably a walk in the park after what.
Well, it really was, because as far as the labor was concerned, it was a song,
Yeah.
because we were used to working hard, so it didn't.
Yeah.
The army life wasn't very tough. It was, I'm sure, for some of the city guys, that didn't do hard labor, but the country folks, they did all right.
Yeah.
And I can always remember the training sergeant out on the rifle range. He says you can always tell the farm guys they knew how to shoot. So.
Now, how did you come to get into radios, and how did you choose to go to radio
Just
school?
out of blue sky. We saw this government school, and my folk couldn't afford to send me to college. So it was the government, and they would teach you radio repair. It was just a radio school. And that's, I had no idea what it was, only that it was in communications. But they used, well, everything was radio then, nothing like today.
Right.
So it was a big deal. But they taught us how to climb poles, we laid all the line on the ground.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the snipers was looking for you out there climbing poles.
Oh,
so
boy.
everything was laid on the ground.
Wow.
But it was easy to find the break, because you could just follow it by hand and find where a shell had cut the lines, or the enemy had cut the lines, or whatever. It was easy to find.
Well, speaking of communications, how was it when you were overseas, as far as mail back and forth to your folks, to your wife? Was that pretty reliable or pretty consistent?
It pretty was, but some I think it was pretty reliable. But they would censor everything that you sent, because Helen would write and tell me that she couldn't read the letter because half of it was cut out or blanked out. But no, but she might get 6 or 8 letters at one time, and be the same way on the other end too. Because I think the Army did a great thing then, because, you know, it was hard. What was there, 6 or 8 million men over there at one time?
Yeah.
And they was always moving. How they kept track of where they was at,
right.
I think they did a pretty good job. And we were always fed good. There was never a shortage of food.
That was my next question. How were living conditions for you, as far as food
well,
and
the food and shelter was pretty much. But we lived out in the open, or in places that you wouldn't want to live. But we always had plenty of food. I can't remember when we didn't have food. But we were always cold because there was no heat.
Was proper clothing provided for the various seasons?
Well, yeah, they were, but a lot of times, even the natives said, you know, in 1944, they had that big blizzard. Even the natives said they'd never remembered a storm like that.
I think, that was like the coldest winter Europe had experienced in like 60 years.
And they blamed it on the explosions, but I think it's just one of those things. Just like this, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this global warming, but I think it's a lot of hogwash. I think it's been like this since time began.
Yeah.
That's my personal feeling.
Yeah.
But we were treated well, and as far as the officers are concerned, you were treated a lot meaner here in the States than you were over there. Because I think those guys depended on you, especially
being treated by the officers is what you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah, the officers were tougher here in the States than they were over there.
Okay.
Because they had to depend on the guys over there too to defend them too.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of the officers, of course, they found us out in a hurry that they didn't show any emblems, because the German snipers would pick those out in a hurry.
How was life, as far as how, for someone like myself, or those that have watched us that have never been in a wartime experience, how was that dealing with the fact that, I mean, you said you got shelled, and just the thought that you had to watch what you're doing because of the snipers. How did you function in a situation like that?
Well, I guess you didn't think too much about it. You had too many other things, and I probably didn't describe that right. A lot of these snipers were not behind the lines, only in when Hitler dressed all of his English-speaking officers in American uniforms during the Battle of the Bulge. The
Right.
snipers were everywhere.
Right.
I can remember one night in Reims, France, that the MPs went up and down the streets, because we were traveling with the 9th Army then. And I don't know how, it took 2 or 3 days to pass a point. That's an army moving. You know, that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But they went up and down the streets and telling people all the American soldiers to stay off the streets, because the Moroccans were going to be on guard duty, and anybody that was white that was on the streets, they didn't ask too many questions. They were shot, because they were desperate then. Because they'd come through there and they changed all the road signs, cutting telephone communication lines, just doing anything to disrupt. So that was tough, that Battle of Bulge. And we was at Strasbourg, France there, and that's where Patton came from and liberated Bastogne. His army was in that country then.
Well, give us give us a rough route of where you went. You came aboard, came on shore at Normandy. Kind of walk us your routing through all the way to Munich.
Well, from Omaha Beach, where we were there for 2 or 3 weeks. I don't remember exactly. Then we went to Rennes, France. That's when they broke out from the hedgerows. And then from there we went to Paris and Versailles. We were stationed there for a while. I don't know how long. Then we were in Mainz, Germany. That was a big town. And from there to Augsburg, Germany, where I did get to see where Martin Luther had signed the papers. I walked through that front door.
Is that right?
Yeah. And that, when we was going through there, and that's not very far from Munich, Germany, you drive down the highway, and German soldiers would be standing there holding out their guns. They wanted to surrender. They wouldn't even stop for them, because they were all surrendering them, because they wanted to surrender before the Russians got to them.
Right, yeah.
But they wouldn't even stop to them. Somebody that could speak German told them what to do, and dropped their guns and congregate at a certain place. But they was ready to give up then. And you felt sorry for some of those guys. You know, it's just like here.
Yeah.
I hate to say this, but you know, this is my personal opinion, I think we're in a position today like Hitler's Germany was in 37 and 38. You know, look what's going on now. Government's taking over the banks, health, school, auto industry, and there's strings attached to that.
Yeah.
Take your guns away, and that's what Hitler did.
Yeah, yeah.
Scares me.
So, and you worked your way up to, and you were in Munich when the war ended?
Yeah, that's where we were stationed. Yeah. And that, when we got coming home, I came home with the 359th Infantry, because we were unattached. When the CID, or whatever they called it, I don't know what it stood for, but it was civil government. They set up the government when there's city government whenever the towns was liberated. But then from there, then we went back. I rode a freight train from Munich, Germany, clear down to Marseille, France, and came home.
Was there any thought at that time, because the war was still going on in Japan, that there was a chance you'd get transferred to the Pacific?
Well, a lot of them were scared. I wasn't, because I didn't think I would have to go, but because I had a lot of points by then. But a lot of the replacements, yeah, they thought they did, because a lot of them that was arriving, you know, in the last 3 or 4 months, maybe 6 months, they was going to ship them to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So I think probably Truman it was a terrible thing that happened, but probably saved a lot of lives in the long run.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of lives.
In your position, I imagine you probably had a lot of interaction with the population, the French, the Germans, and such. Is that the case? And
yeah,
how was that? How did you?
But I couldn't communicate. Some of them, even in those days, a lot of people could speak English. But you go over there now, and I've been over there 3 or 4 times, 5 times, 6 times over to Europe. You just seeing kids you think is a high school kid, you can go up to them and 99% of them know how to speak English.
Yeah, yeah. But how were you treated by the locals, particularly when you got into Germany?
They were meek as mice.
Oh, was that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was very little. Around Munich, one night an officer wanted me to drive him to Prague, Czechoslovakia. He was a nice guy, and he kind of liked me, and I liked him, but anyway, we got over there, and he said, you got to stay here by yourself. And he said, don't you leave this Jeep, because I was in Russian territory.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Those guys swarmed me around me but I had the gun in my hand.
The Czechs or Russians?
Russians.
Oh, what was that like?
Oh, that was scary. That was scary. Those guys were for real. They were not very good. They were pretty, of course, you know, the Russians used, not a lot of white Russians fought on the front lines.
Right.
They were using the Siberians and all their lesser civil people were in the front lines. I read a lot of history books. You know, Stalin cleaned out all of his prisons, you know, and whenever they was making a big push and there was big landmines that they had to walk through, guess who went through there? The prisoners.
Wow, just
And
pure
if
fodder.
they survived, they were free, and if not, that was it.
Wow. So these are the types that you were kind of swarming you, and
Yeah.
and you felt.
Yeah, he said they'd steal you blind, and I'm sure they would have.
Yeah. Were they looking to get your watch and trade for your watch?
Oh, he was afraid they'd steal the Jeep, or at
Oh,
least
right, yeah.
the tires off from it. So I had to stay right there, but I tried to put on a big front.
Were you able to communicate with them at all, or was it just pure?
No. All you could do is just shake your head.
And how long were you in
Oh,
that
I
situation?
don't know. Maybe a couple hours I had to wait on it.
Wow.
But that's pretty lonesome when you're
Yeah.
nobody around. But that was, you know, there's probably could talk all night. You know, you think of, is that S-E-N or S-O-N? My name. S-E-N.
Okay.
It's S-E-N. But you know, you get train of thought and you think of something else that adds on. Probably the most frightened I was, though, was when we were stationed in London for maybe 6 weeks, I don't know. And that's when the buzz bombs were coming over.
Yeah, talk about those for those who watch. That's an amazing.
Well, you know, London is a big city, and there's quite a few skyscrapers, and we were stationed, I don't know whereabouts, but you couldn't see anywhere. You could see across the street. But you'd hear those motors coming, and when they shut off, that's where they went down.
That's I understand was the scary part of it.
Yeah,
was the silence.
You didn't know where it was gonna land. You could hear it coming, and then all of a sudden that motor would shut off, and down it comes.
Wow.
That was the scariest part because you didn't know where to run.
You're right. Right.
There was a lot of London was really butchered up too.
Was it
Yeah.
when you were there? Yeah. Still from the bombings and stuff.
Yeah. Well, not now it isn't, but
Yeah, right.
back in those days.
Right.
Yeah, well, whatever used that for a bombing exercise. Those English, they were tough people. I don't know, and I think you can adjust to anything, but it would be tough on I have kids that are older than you are, but it'd be hard for our kids to adjust. Back to the dirty 30s, that's what we called it when I was growing up, dirty 30s. There was no money, no jobs, no food, no welfare. So it would be tough on the kids and the grandkids. That would be unreal.
Yeah. So you remember where you were when VE Day was announced? Was there?
Yeah, I was in Munich.
Was there a big celebration? What was going on?
No. Well, I'm sure there was in some like London and Paris and places like that, and probably in New York too. I'm sure there was.
Yeah.
But where we was at, no, it was just another day. So I can't remember anything exciting. Only that the war was over with.
How did you feel personally about it being over and why I survived this thing?
All I thought about was coming home. I wanted to come home.
Oh boy.
You know, when you lead a country life like I was used to living, and here I was 8,000 miles from home. Gosh.
A daughter and a newborn back home,
Yeah,
or a wife
son.
and a newborn back home,
back
and
home.
oh boy. So you took that freighter home and
Came home on a Liberty ship.
Liberty ship.
And that was a long, long ride because we come home during a storm, and a lot of people got sick on that thing too. But it didn't bother me. When we got home, we landed in New York Harbor on Christmas Eve, and they wouldn't let us off. So some of the guys did get off. They climbed down the anchor ropes, but we stayed on board. And but boy, they treated us royally for that. And there was 4 or 5 of us that was coming to Colorado from New York, and we had one whole passenger car. Just the 5 of us had our own kitchen dealie, and they cooked for us. And I think coming back in those days, of course it was a troop train.
Yeah.
And they was going helter-skelter every which way, letting off troops. I think it was 2 or 3 days to get here from New York.
Wow.
But they wined and dined us the whole way.
And you got off, you said, out in Sterling?
No, got discharged at Fort Logan.
Fort Logan?
And I don't know, I took a train though back to, well, they had train ticket for me back home from Fort Logan.
And your wife was out in Sterling then? Is that?
Yeah, she was
okay.
in Sterling. She didn't know I was coming home, and I didn't know either. You know, you couldn't, you didn't know.
Yeah, right.
There was a lot of Mickey Mouse things happened at Fort Logan. I threw away a sword that I picked up, and I should have never done that. It's still in New York Harbor. I'd like to have it dredged and find it. Had a big diamond in the handle. They told us that if we took any of that war booty home, if they caught us, we was going to go to jail. Well, we believed it then.
Yeah.
That was stealing war booty, and I wished I had it. I didn't bring very many souvenirs home. I brought a German Mauser that was still in a Cosmoline. Still have that. And a picture of Hitler's house in the forward. Finished here, I'll show you some teacups I got out of Hitler's home in Munich, Germany.
Really? So you went through that as well?
Yeah, oh yeah, I went through that. I even have a tile off of Hitler's bathroom tile. Anything that wasn't bolted down was stolen or ripped off.
So this was his home in Munich. This wasn't like the Eagle's Nest or one of his.
No, I've been up to Eagle's Nest.
Oh.
There was nothing there.
Oh, right.
Everything was stripped up there. Everything. There was nothing up there. They went through there like a hurricane. But I've been up there several times. That was quite a place, that Hitler's
Wow.
Nest.
Yeah.
But you know that mountain up there, I don't know how to describe it, but it just bombs all over that mountain where they was trying to hit that house. And they did hit it. But they missed a lot of them too. And but that's a beautiful place, that Birch's Garden. Beautiful place. Beautiful place.
Well, let's move ahead now, or back to, so you took the train up from Fort Logan to Sterling. Nobody knows you're coming home. Can you describe that, coming up and to the front door, or in the homecoming, what that was like?
I thought my in-laws were going to, because that's where my wife was staying, I thought they were going to faint. But I had told Helen, my wife, that a timetable that I thought I would be home. But they held us up at Fort Logan for a couple of days too, but just paperwork. Well, they were discharging so many people. And well, when they paid us off, I think they gave us $100 in cash. Man, that's like dying and going to heaven.
Wow. Wow. And how was it then, the homecoming? And when was how old was your son now at this point?
Well, he would have been 3 years old then.
Probably didn't recognize you.
Oh,
didn't
no, he wouldn't recognize me. But there was no big homecoming because, you know, I probably was the only one that got off in Sterling.
Yeah.
I did know another kid at Sterling, but he didn't come home that day that I did. But no, there was no big homecoming like they'd fly them all into Peterson or down to Air Force.
Right.
You know, groups of them. No, we came home one at a time.
Right. Did you, in your travels, in your time in the military, ever stumble across anybody from home? Ever come across anybody you knew? Or
Not one person. I had a cousin over in. He was in the medical corps. He was a doctor, and I did talk to him several times on the phone, but I could never get up to see him. But no, didn't see a soul. You know, 16 million soldiers they had during World War II, something like that.
Yeah.
Be pretty hard to find somebody that you knew out of that.
Right. So you're back in Sterling, and take your story from there. Did you relax for a little bit, or where'd you
I think I was off probably home for 2 weeks, and then I went down to the local. Well, Sterling's just a little town. Yeah. And the only people that were hiring there was they had two Safeway stores there, and a big feedlot. That's about the only job there was, unless you wanted to go out on a farm and work as a farm labor. So I went down to Safeway one day, and he said, "Can you go to work now?" And I said, "I'd like to have the rest of the day off." And he said, "Be here in the morning."
Jeez.
So I worked for 17 years with Safeway, and then I went out on my own. We bought a grocery store, and we still got one grocery store left.
Here locally in Greeley, or where was your source? In
Hudson.
Uh-huh.
It was like our supplier was affiliated foods like Jerry's Market down here, and Toddy's was affiliated foods, and Jerry's Market up, and Stephen's up at Windsor. They were all affiliated foods.
So how many years all told were you in the grocery business?
Well, since I went to work at the grocery business January 23rd, 1946. I can remember the day I went to work. I worked at Safeway then for 17 years, and then had a chance. Our oldest son was in high school then, and he went to 4 different high schools, and Safeway had you so brainwashed, and they're a good company too, but you
transferring you around?
Yeah, they said, if you didn't work at Safeway, you were a nobody. But I just said, enough of this. So he did. He went to 4 different high schools. Of course, back in those days, Safeway, they wouldn't even trust the CEO. They'd let you stay maybe in the store for 3 or 4 months, and then they transferred you because they didn't want you to have a sweetheart deal with somebody, see, so they always kept moving you around. So then that's when we had a chance to buy a store, and had a store at Denver University for 9 years, and we had 9 days off in 9 years' time.
Wow. Oh, geez.
And then we sold that, and I was off for 6 months, and it was working for somebody else was tougher than it was for yourself, so I bought another store. At one time we had 3 grocery stores, but that run your feet off.
Yeah, I bet.
But it was one thing about the grocery business, you didn't get rich, but if you made a dime, you kept it, because you was always so tired at night you wouldn't go out and spend it.
So you'd mentioned through the years you'd been back to Europe. I imagine you've been. Did you go to the various places that you were stationed, and did you follow the route back? And
yeah, I did that, and been to Dachau 2 or 3 times, and we used to have a friend, and since then he's passed away. But we used to go over there. I suppose we've been over there 6 or 8 times.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, been to Dachau, and been to Munich, been to London.
Obviously, very
Paris.
much changed from what you went from your first tour.
Oh yeah. But I haven't retraced actually. But I've been to a lot of the places that I had been. Yeah. But it was an experience.
Did you ever keep in touch with any of the buddies back then, and any sort of reunions or anything like that?
I kept track of one guy that I was kind of a friend. He lived in Maryland, but he turned out to be an alcoholic, and he's since passed away too. But never did create too many friends. I had a guy down at Fort Morgan, and I still see him every once in a while. I was in basic training with him, but that's because I found out he was from Fort Morgan in Sterling. Flaglar isn't very far from there.
Right.
Then another friend that, and he was a friend, and he's still living. He lives in Brighton. I was in basic training with him, but never created any friends because you wasn't stationed with a group of people, because you was always going somewhere. And there was just a very few people in our organization that were soldiers. The rest of them were civilians. So didn't create too many friends.
Well, as we'll start to wind down this interview, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about, or any stories you're remembering now that you want to bring out so that we hopefully round out this whole story properly without leaving anything out?
Well, I right off my hand, I can't think about it. The two highlights, I guess, was us being stationed in London and being at Dachau. Other than that, I can't claim any victory or any honors from anything else. Only it was an experience that I'd never want to go through again.
Well, that's usually a question I always like to ask too towards the end of the interview. How do you think that time period played a role in your life, changed your life, affected your life, or did it, or was it just simply just a chapter in your life you went through?
You know, I wouldn't know how to describe that. It didn't take me very long to adjust back to civilian life, and maybe that's the reason why I adjusted, because I didn't really have a lot of friends.
Yeah.
To remind me of it. I support I belong to the VFW and the American Legion, and I support those people. Well, I think it, like I say, I think it's, I'm all for the military.
Yeah.
They're great, great people, and thank God for them. And I just hope they're not destroyed like they were in a couple of presidents ago where they ruined the military. And I know a lot of military people I know today, they are very, very discouraged with what's going on now. And all these secrets, supposedly secrets, are given away now, they're out in the public. Those people over there, I don't know what you can call them humans. I guess the good Lord calls them human, but you can't call them animals, because animals don't do those things.
Right.
But that scares me, and it's they're really starting to raise Cain over there now. Car bombs going. Of course, they know we're leaving, so they don't care.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen. It scares me.
Well, Andy, we'll wind this thing down. Is there a closing statement you would like to make to people that'll watch this, family, whatever, to kind of cap off this interview, or not?
I don't know what it would be.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know what it would be.
Fair enough.
It's but I do support our military.
Okay.
And I guess I can say I'm so far right it takes a 4x4 to prop me up. But I got a couple of good stories, but I won't tell it on here.
Okay. Well, Andy, I want to thank you for taking the time to sit down and tell your story today. But more importantly, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
Well, thank you. You know. Yeah.
Tell me best you can about this display you got here.
Well, that was given on my 80th birthday. I believe that they gave that to me for the coffee club that I did. And I guess I can read some of it on here. There's an emblem of the Third Army.
So you were never actually in a unit. You was always just attached to somebody?
I was attached to the 359th to come home. And I was in the 90th. The 359th, I don't know. But I was at one time attached to the 90th, the 359th, and that they were in the Third Army. A lot of these, that was qualified for a rifleman, expert rifleman. A lot of these things here I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't have the SHAEF, our shoulder patch was a SHAEF, and I don't have that. I don't know where that...
A SHAEF meaning?
That was Supreme Headquarters,
okay.
Allied Expeditionary
Okay,
Force.
uh-huh.
Supreme Headquarters, Allied yeah, that's what SHAEF standing for. And these are all medals that I was qualified for. And those ribbons.
Let's see if I can zero in on some of these pictures and without getting the glare. How easy that's going to be, but This top picture, do you remember where that was taken?
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah.
That's the emblem, though. SHAEF emblem on that.
And then you've got a...
And I can't tell you where. This was taken in California at Camp Crowder, or wasn't Camp Crowder, well maybe it was too. But that was Japanese concentration camp. The Americans had
The
set up.
relocation camp? Or
Yeah,
the,
yeah, relocation camp, yeah.
And then, any idea on...
Have no idea where this was taken at.
Yeah, don't think I'm gonna... Got a pretty good glare on all this, but... Okay.